my dad wasn't a member and my mom wasn't active until I had left home and was, raising my family. And I think in a way that's a plus because when I work with the missionaries or when I work with people who are converts to the church, I feel like, we kind of speak the same language and things. So this quilt is actually from my grandmother Fox, my dad's mother, who wasn't a member. She was Northern Baptist, but she was a great lady. She had in my dad's side of the family, they go gray really early. Like I don't have that hair, and I deduced I think it's from the Voris line. So my grandmother Fox is a Voris, and so a grandmother had beautiful silver hair, and she was an immaculate housekeeper, and she loved to quilt, and she was in a quilting bee, and she did it every week, and then they had a beautiful luncheon. She was in Kansas City, and with just those perfect cookies that were just perfectly crisp and things like that. And so if I have any manners, which I'm not pretending I do, but if I have any good manners, it came from that side of the family. They were, kind of upper middle class and had, lovely homes and things and did beautiful handiwork. And so I think that's kind of neat that I have that side of my family. So, and her name is Teresa, and I loved her name. It's Terressa. And the story is that her mother was reading a novel when she was pregnant with my grandmother, and the heroine's name, I guess, must have been Teresa. I'd love to find that book sometime. And I loved it so much, I named my first daughter Teresa. So grandmother made quilts for each of her granddaughters. I don't think the grandsons, there's only one grandson, my poor brother. It seems like the poor boys never get anything, huh? Anyway, each granddaughter, when she turned like 18, she got to pick a quilt. And every year we'd look in grandmother's like cedar chest and see all these quilts nicely folded, and we'd look at them and think, oh, I hope I get to have this one, So this is hand stitched, it's hand cross stitched, and all the quilting is hand done and the binding and everything.
Wow.
And so for a long time I kept it just put away like you do special things. And then I was cleaning a cupboard, pulled it out, and it was getting kind of rust stains on it or some kind of stain. So I washed it, it came out, and I use it. I use it. When we go on trips, I always bring this blanket because it's the perfect weight. Anyway, that's the story about this one. And there's something else.
And that was your grandmother?
My grandmother Fox made this and gave it to me. Yeah. Well, I think it's really cool. On my other side of the family, this is my mom when she was little, that I have the pioneer heritage. So my mom comes from a long line of pioneers, and on both sides of her family, her mother's side and her father's side. And this is 4 generations. So there's my mom, Shirley Sampson, her dad, Darville Sampson.
Darville?
Darville.
How funny.
With an E, not an I.
Darville with an E.
Yeah.
How funny.
Darville Alonzo Sampson. And his mother, Mary Alice Allred, and her father, oh gosh, I'm not prepared. I want to say Daniel Allred, but I could be wrong. So I'm sorry, I do not have that.
You have Allreds in your family too?
Yeah.
Wow.
On Grandpa's mother's side. Yeah.
That's a pretty famous, Utah family, the Allreds.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I come from polygamy.
And actually, you're probably
related to a lot of people.
It's so funny though, because Don's old boss at Dial Precision, Dan, he's an Allred, and he's not a member because they had already left the church, but his family line is all polygamy. You're probably related to him.
I probably am.
How funny.
Yeah. Yeah.
How funny.
And there's a cool story. No, maybe that was the Strands. Never mind. We won't go there. Okay. So
question, that is your mother?
Yeah.
This
That's
is
your
my
mother?
mom. Yeah.
That's so neat.
So,
Neat that we met her.
Your
a cool
mom,
story-
her dad, and
Yes,
his mom,
And
yes,
her
and
dad.
her dad.
Her dad.
How funny.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's quite a generational photo.
His grandfather, her great grandfather.
That's
her
so neat.
Grandmother. Yeah.
I dig those
Yeah.
frames too.
So let me share about the sugar bowl. Okay, so we have, this is not it. We have a sugar bowl in our family that came across the plains. And the story is that it was in the DUP museum. And my grandmother's first cousin, Margaret Becker, you just have to meet Margaret. Wow, she would call and you would just have to, my mom would just have to sit down what she was doing, and because she knew she was going to sit there an hour. But Margaret had all the family stories, and Margaret went into that DUP museum and said, that is our family sugar bowl, and she got it out.
That's mine. It's coming home with me.
Wow.
And she didn't even keep it. It went from oldest daughter to oldest daughter.
Oh, okay.
So her aunt was the oldest daughter, my great grandmother Lucy Lee, and she gave it to her daughter, my grandmother Gwen Sampson, and then she gave it to my mother, was the oldest in the family, Shirley, and then my oldest sister passed away in 2006 without any children. So my mother gave it to my daughter, my oldest daughter, Teresa. So Teresa has the authentic sugar bowl. Okay, so I don't have it, Teresa has it. But I want to tell you about this more humble sugar bowl. Mary Alice Allred Sampson, she had like 11 kids. My grandpa was the oldest. And her husband developed heart problems and couldn't do strenuous work. So my grandpa, when he was 13, he quit school and went out to herd sheep and cattle and things and became a cowboy. And sent the money to the family to help support them. So they didn't have a lot. They were very humble. And I appreciate having humble, family heritage too. Because it's good to be humble. Good to be humble, salt of the earth people. Grandpa give you the shirt off his back. He was, very honest man. There's a story of my mom when she was a girl. They didn't have much. They didn't have crayons, and she brought crayons home from school, and she was marched right back to school to give those crayons back. Just that, and aren't we just so grateful for our heritage and what we were taught? Okay, so our little sugar bowl came out of an oatmeal box back in early 1900s.
Wow.
And this
Oatmeal box when they give you
came
things.
out of an oatmeal box. And grandmother, I can just see that she probably had very few nice things, and she preserved this sugar bowl.
How funny.
And it came down to my mom. So, the things we cherish maybe don't have a monetary value, but oh gosh, this sugar bowl
It
means
probably
a lot to
is
me.
worth something, Sydney.
I should go online
oatmeal.
and have Daryl go online and find
Yeah.
out.
It's probably not that humble.
Well,
It was probably at the time, but it probably isn't now.
compared to the other sugar bowl, which who knows what that's worth. We haven't checked that out either. That came from England,
Oh, yeah.
I think the Quaker
Yeah.
Oatmeal Company would be
Yeah.
the first to want to buy it back.
Yeah, and
That's-
they're not
that's
having
an
it.
heirloom. No, they're
Yeah,
not
No.
having it. It's a family
This
heirloom.
is
That's
our-
cute.
this is our-
That's really awesome.
Anyway, it means a lot to me because it also represents to me my grandpa's sacrifice. That family came first, that he went out and lived among kind of rough men, and he just learned how to provide for his family, gave his, before he got married, gave his parents money, and even after they were married. How much time do we have? Real quick.
It's okay. Kathleen
When-
said, take your time.
When Grandpa met my grandma, it was really funny. It was in Cedar City, and his best friend and grandma's best friend were getting married, and they had to go to Beaver, to where the county was, courthouse, and the friends were like, well, and so they had to make a long trip in a wagon pulled by horses. So Grandpa was like 17 and Grandma was like 16, or maybe they were each a year older. I can't remember exactly. I know. And
they were
for
married.
time, and I think they just kind of met through their friends who were getting married, and Grandma and Grandpa were going to be the witnesses, and their friends were like, well, you guys should just get married.
What? Just make it a whole thing. You're getting down there.
Wow.
They
They
did.
eloped. They went with their friends and got married. They came
And they had
back.
witnesses.
They didn't have anything. Grandma, I think she had a year left at school. And her mother said, I have this in her history, you're a DAMN fool, and wanted to get it annulled. But Grandma had issues with her mother, and I think she was happy to leave home. So they started with nothing, and Mom came like a year later. But they raised 5 kids, and through the Depression and stuff. Mom was born in 1930. Anyway,
Your
that's
mom and
just
my
some
mom
of
were
our
both born in
history.
1930.
Wow.
I love the era. I do
Well,
understand what you're saying.
Yeah, they
Depression.
they appreciate things
Yeah.
because they didn't have. Yeah, a lot of times Mom didn't have indoor plumbing. Yeah. Grandpa always made sure his horses had a nice stable and corral, and he didn't care too much what the house was like. Anyway.
She did it.
Okay. So, this is my grandma Gwen that got married when she was 16 or 17. And it was so funny. You remember how we were told to write our personal history? And then how oftentimes you would get like a notebook and it would have, like childhood, and it'd have questions for you to answer. And then adolescence and adulthood and raising a family and things. Well, Grandma had several of those because I went through all her papers after she passed. And then luckily I found where she began her history. But the thing is, she would lose it. So then I would find another history, and it would go to the same spot. It would end at the same spot, and then she would lose it. And I think she had like 2 or 3 histories.
How funny.
But I was able to put them together, and do like a little history. I'll just pass that around.
Okay.
You guys can just got it printed at Staples, nothing big. And then this is my mom when she graduated from high school. She graduated from Moapa High School in Overton, Nevada. And I'll just pass that around the other way. But let me just tell you how Mom came back to the church, because I think it's inspiring. So I became active like in 4th grade, and then I would bring my younger brother and sister to church. And I got married in the temple, and my younger sister got married in the temple, and my brother went on a mission. He's 5 years younger. Well, Mom was a very protective mother, and so it was really hard for her to send him. Luckily, he didn't go like to Guatemala, where he would love to have gone. He went to North Salt Lake Mission. So, but that was a blessing for her. She probably would have had a nervous breakdown. Oh, yeah. Anyway, when he was on his mission, she would have the missionaries over, and all the time. And she did ceramics and porcelain, and so they made things to send home to their moms. And they would do ceramics with her and porcelain, and she would feed them and everything. And I just think that spirit that they brought helped her to come back to the church. Also, she was able to quit smoking. She had, people are addicted differently. So my dad wasn't even a member, but things came out from the Surgeon General in the 60s and 70s, smoking's bad for you. he just quit. But Mom smoked a lot more than he did, and she was really addicted. But she was finally able to quit smoking, and then she became active, and she turned into Molly Mormon. She was making bread, she was making jellies and jams, and she was Relief Site president like a couple of years later, and and she just said, I just can't believe how much easier it was to quit smoking when I had the Spirit with me.
Aw.
So I think all those years she went inactive as a young adult, all those years that she was away from the church, she was fighting the Spirit all those years. And but when the time was right, I have a testimony of that when the time is right, things happen, and they happen fast.
Wow.
And same thing happened with her sister.
It's all
But
healing.
Anyway, it just,
Wow.
yeah, you're just back. It's almost like you never left.
And then she was sealed in the St. George Temple?
Yeah, and then my dad, I don't know how many sets of missionaries he went through, but when the time was right, he joined the church, and then we were sealed a year and a half later in St. George Temple.
And how old were you?
28 when he was baptized.
Now, were all the kids able to go?
My
There's a
oldest
picture
sister
of them.
was never active. So
Oh, okay.
3 of us were.
St. George Temple
Yeah. Yeah.
on August 13th, 1988.
Aw,
Yeah.
that's neat.
I just happened to flip to that page when you were talking about it.
Those
So.
things are really, thank you.
That's
Yeah.
really
Those
neat.
things are really
There's a
special
picture
to
of
me.
Cindy and President Nicolaisen in there.
Oh.
Yeah, it's cute.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Can't wait to see him.
So, I don't know, I love these histories, and my mom was really good about sharing stories with me. And I think I need to be doing that with my daughters, my son, and with my grandkids. So they know, who are these people, and things. And so, anyway, that's just a little bit of my history.
That's
So
so
thank
nice.
you for letting me
Awesome.
share.
You're
Thank
welcome,
you.
Cindy.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for sharing with us.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Because if we don't write things down,
And write them
work
down.
on
And
it, who's gonna do it?
And I have my dad's history all ready to send to Staples to print. And I've had it ready for months.
Oh.
And that's my number one goal next month is, and my kids all have these copies of these histories.
That's neat.
And then I gotta work on mine.
Well, it's
Yeah.
wonderful you shared. This will go to you. This
you.
audio I'll send to your email.
Oh, thank you. Maybe I could put that up on Family Search or something.
It's beautiful Thanksgiving.
That's really
Yeah,
neat.
Daryl showed me how to do that.
Oh, good. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and turn our time over to sweet Kathleen Torres, who's got a large lesson
A
condensed.
short lesson.
She made it nice and simple.
She shortened it.
Well, in her own words, she pretty much said, let's just enjoy the highlights. There's a lot of the,
There you
basics.
go.
But if any of you've read at least some of it, it was interesting.
I
because
did read
we're
the
talking
whole
about
thing
that
like 3 or
territory.
4 times. I don't believe
Wow.
in marking hardback books. I just can't do it. So that's why all these little
So,
yellow tabs.
It must drive you nuts when you see mine all.
I can do it with but
A highlighter.
book, I just
Hi.
Good to see you.
middle school, you know.
Does she need a ride today? I can do it. Finally.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay.
So if you read it, you know it's a lot about the politics of the time from when they got there in 1847 until they achieved statehood was a period of 49 years.
Wow.
So you're looking at a 50-year period, a half a century it took from the time they got there until they were finally granted statehood.
Well, I think they were maybe, I'm sorry to jump in here, I'm thinking maybe they were okay with that.
Yeah.
Because they could just do their own thing and not have the government messing around.
Well, the government did mess
Like
around
special,
with
well, they
politics.
did, but I think they were okay until that happened, you know?
So,
I was amazed.
there
at
were
all those.
other pioneers besides the church pioneers. There was the Oregon Trail, people going up to the northwest, you know. Or remember the little Oregon Trail computer game on the early days?
Oh,
And you die of dysentery.
Rattlesnake.
Yes, did you take enough supply?
What is that, television or?
Hardly anybody made it.
No, it was a little computer game.
Yeah, probably.
And then there was people in
Atari.
4th grade trail going down towards the, the Mexican border into those lands. So when the Saints left, they were going to a territory that they did not know whether it was going to be United States or Mexican. They really,
That was cool.
they had faith in their prophet.
Yeah.
Brigham Young said, this is what I've been told, and when he gets there and he says this is the place, they put their faith in the Lord and put their faith in their prophet that he was going to guide them correctly. So they really didn't worry, it seems that they didn't worry about it too much. They just assumed that it would be America, the United States, and it was, of course. And when they left, they affirmed to the United States government that they will still be loyal American citizens, even though they were taken off and going into these territories. Brigham Young was a firm believer in the Constitution.
Mm-hmm.
He said, I want to say to every man, the Constitution of the United States, as formed by our fathers, was dictated, was revealed, was put into the hearts of the Almighty, who sits enthroned in the midst of the heavens. There is no law in the United States or in the Constitution, but I am willing and ready to make honorable. So in 1946, the Nauvoo High Council also wrote a letter to the United States government affirming that they would be true to their country. And what was the line in there? If it is geographically ours, and of right, no foreign power should hold dominion there. And if our services are required to prevent it, these services will be cheerfully rendered according to our ability. So,
Yeah.
if we need to defend this United States territory, we will do so. So what happened shortly after that?
Mormon Battalion.
Mormon Battalion. They had a chance to prove their loyalty. So just months later, 500 men, plus a few wives and children that went with them, were called upon to go down and fight. But we know from history that they never had to fight. We didn't lose anybody into war. And I think we all know the story of some of the saints were not quite so happy.
Mm-hmm.
Why should we defend a country who's been persecuted?
Our prophet got killed.
Yeah, not only did they not protect us, they were also part of the persecution of us. Why
Yeah.
should we do that?
Yeah.
So Brigham Young had basically two answers. One of them was financial,
Mm-hmm.
because they got the uniform stipend, I believe at that time was $15.
What, a lot of money back then.
It was,
Yeah.
and so but they weren't required to wear a uniform, so they donated that money back to the church for like the perpetual immigration fund and things like that to keep the church going. And so that was an advantage to the church.
You know what I loved about what you just read is the proclaiming the resistance to being subject to the same style of government allowed. They said, services will cheerfully render. They're talking about preventing war. If there's any way we can prevent it, we're basically going to save you and our nation needless bloodshed. And I think that's exactly what that was. Because they didn't have to fight, they actually created great relations. And I don't think that part's mentioned, but that's such an important thing.
Just the way we handle things,
Yeah.
even though we didn't get treated fairly, doesn't mean we're gonna do
We
tit for
turn the
tat.
cheek. We
Be
turn the
peacemakers
cheek, and that
anyway.
preventing it right there is in writing. And maybe that was Heavenly Father's message to the nation.
We are American citizens and we will do our duty.
Yeah, of course.
And he knew that in serving that they would be looked upon, the church would be looked upon more favorably. If they went ahead and served without a fuss.
Well, and even now,
Exactly.
even
Yeah,
now,
yeah,
our
sure.
church is looked on pretty favorably. I mean, we
Yes,
still have the, those Mormons, but even those people that say, those Mormons, they still are like, they do pretty good stuff. They volunteer here, or they know languages, or, they do this, or they do that. And, and then when they did the grain, and they got the grain from the Relief Society,
yeah.
it's like, are we really that bad? they
Well, the government has been incredibly favorable, regardless of what
But-
personal opinion of
Yeah.
people. So just as
But
a,
it's really easy
Yeah.
to go with the grain, to go with, the
The
people that,
popular thought.
the popular thought.
It's, yeah, and it doesn't
And
necessarily mean
so-
it's correct. It's
Yeah.
just popular.
So that's,
The church had to, they just had to keep proving.
yeah. Turn the
Follow
other
their
cheek.
leaders, whatever the leader said,
Yep.
have your faith, put your trust in the Lord, follow your leaders, and we're gonna make it through this, we'll be okay.
Yeah.
And I believe the only woman that is mentioned is Eliza R. Snow. She talks about how the Vanguard company that came in flew the flag as they traveled on the head wagon, they had the flag up. And when they got to the valley, she said she got there on October 2nd, 1847. Soon after our arrival in the valley, a tall liberty pole was erected, and from its summit the stars and stripes seemed to float with even more significance, if possible, than they were wont to do in the eastern breezes. And then she wrote a poem called Ode to the Flag.
Wow.
Oh, I love that flag would be my girlish glee, a prattling girl upon my grandsire's knee. I heard him tell strange tales with valor rife, how that same flag was brought with blood and life. And then it goes on to the next page.
So nice.
Read that. She, quite a poet.
She was.
She said this last sentence, we took the flag and journeyed west. We wore its motto graven on each breast. And instead of just saying like the breast, I'm sorry, the picture me, she said on each breast. I could picture a flag here and a flag here and.
Yeah.
Maybe on each and every person. Each person.
Oh, that's
Well,
true.
Yeah. So when they
Yeah.
got there, it was a I can't get this word, theodemocracy.
Yeah.
Theo meaning theism, God,
Theology.
that the rules for the church would be the rules for the land. Because practically everybody there.
I'm gonna go.
Wouldn't that be a nice way to live?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Turn in my.
If the rules were good enough for the church, would be good enough for the land. So the leaders of the church were also the political leaders. The equivalents. First, the High Council. They elected John Smith, who was, at the time, the patriarch of the church, to be the president of the High Council. They were like the ruling body. And they would make the decisions. And they had a conference, just like we do in church. The names were presented. Brigham Young wasn't there at the time. For their sustaining vote, and they became both the religious leaders and the governmental leaders in the territory at that time. That if these rules are good enough for church members, they're good enough for us as citizens. So they went that way as long as until the government stepped in and said, you know what? We're getting a little too much power. We need to rein you in a little bit. But that was a little while later. I got a kick out of this Brigham Young quote.
Oh, about lawyers.
He says, it will be up to the High Council to observe those principles which have been instituted in the stakes of Zion for the government of the church, and to pass laws and ordinances as shall be necessary for the peace and prosperity of the city for the time being, if such need should be, though we trust few or none will be necessary. For you have had line upon line, precept upon precept, and know what is right, and our motto is every person do their duty. So it's just kind of a little scolding there, a little chastising. We shouldn't need any laws. We shouldn't need any rules, because y'all know better.
Yeah.
You keep the commandments, you don't need the.
Yes, if you're doing,
Yes.
if you're living by the commandments, you're gonna be a good citizen.
Yeah.
So
quit
that
speeding.
council came up with a basic 5 laws and 2 ordinances, because they had to have something on the books. So law number 1, everybody do their share. Everybody pitches in and works just as hard, no sloughing off. Everybody has to use the utmost exertion to cultivate the earth, sustain himself and his family, and so on.
So everyone had garden.
Yes.
What got me is how they get striped on the back if they didn't do certain things.
Yes.
That was kind of
Yeah, that comes up
I like
in
the
number
Puritan.
4.
I know. I didn't know about that.
Number 2, any person convicted of violence on a person, property, threatening or
Oh,
rioting
this
shall
is
receive
like a criminal thing.
Yeah.
Not
Because
just,
of laws and
not
ordinances.
just because you
39
didn't weed your
lashes.
garden.
Oh, you're right. You're right. That wasn't on there.
Whoa.
Well, then, actually,
That's
Violence, if there's violence.
Yeah, the violent crime is number 2, and you'll get 39
And it's
lashes on your
a
bare
corporate
back,
up to
punishment.
and a $5 fine, anywhere from $5 to $500.
Wow.
How could you have paid $500 fine at that time? That would be, they didn't have any money.
Right.
Number 3, any person convicted of adultery or fornication will receive 39 lashes to the bare back
good.
and $1,000 fine.
Ouch.
Wow.
$1,000 fine.
Well, just, we don't call it just happen to do the way people talk today. They call it what it is. Back then, I don't think that's a bad thing to name it what it is. You know?
Yes, things like, you don't say homeless anywhere, you say the unhoused. It's the same thing. Haven't you heard that on the news?
Yes.
This
No.
unhoused population needs to be put in.
Yeah, but what I mean is
unhoused.
sin is sin and
Yes,
sin is
that's-
sin. Let's
yeah,
call it
black
for
and
what it is.
white.
Yeah, let's
That's
make
it.
it clear.
So, number 4, rule number 4 is the one that talks about the lashes. Any person or persons convicted of any said crimes shall be sentenced to receive a number of lashes on the bare back, not to exceed 39. And number 5, this one would not cut it today. Any person or persons convicted of drunkenness, cursing,
Wow.
swearing, foul or indecent language. You can get that on the television,
Yeah.
on the news, anything now.
It's terrible.
Unnecessary firing of guns within or about the forts. Unusual noise or noises. No oompa oompa parties in the driveway. Or in any other way disturbing the quiet or peace of the community will be fined not less than $25.
Boy,
So,
Wow.
my block would be rich.
none of those. I mean, those are all common occurrences for us, and we just, we're living in it.
Yeah.
There were 2 ordinances. Don't take more than your fair share. You know, when they were doling out supplies and so forth, a lot of them were, you know, remember the United Order, you know, at times was experimented with and tried. Never take more than your fair share. You could be fined between $500 and $500. And ordinance number 7, keep your animals under control. No wandering cattle, dogs, cats, sheep, upon wheat land or driven through any, or be driven on the road passing through it. Keep your animals under control, your herds.
That was their wheat, that was their source of food.
Yeah, that you
Yes.
couldn't have that horse eating up your wheat, yeah.
So by the next time they had a general conference, Brigham Young had returned. That was in 1848, and already they had 4,000 saints come into the Salt Lake Valley area, and 200 more that came in from California. Remember, the battalion got to San Diego, were not needed. Some of them went up to Utah, some of them stayed in San Diego, and some of them went up to Sacramento and the American River there. So some of them did come back, and they, you know, sustained. Now there became a need for a little more law, a little more restrictions. But they were dividing up into wards. Now, how many wards did they say? 17?
19.
19.
First.
And then the bishop was made
Like the
the
governor?
political leader
For the ward,
for his
for that
ward.
area.
So each bishop, instead of the general high council, it then went to the local bishops and their ward
Isn't
councils
it interesting?
to
It's like how, smaller is better.
Yeah.
to
Things
enforce
get
the
too
laws
big.
for
Yeah,
for
it's
your
better if you
particular
govern
people and your
smaller.
particular area. So it became their job to do that.
It's just so neat to think that we are beneficiaries of all their hard work.
Yes.
And the organization that we take for granted, we pay tithing, we go to church, we worship, and we feel free to do so. But all that structure underneath that Sunday was so cool.
In a building we didn't build,
We didn't,
in
yeah.
a parking
have a
area
building
we didn't
front,
need to
yeah.
deal with.
Well, I did as a kid.
We did as early married couples.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
did do that, but it's okay because.
But knowing that that's
that
what
was
the
the
case
step
is
into-
now.
yeah,
The building
exactly.
is not something you had to put
Eventually
together.
They had to
No, right.
look to the what was written in the Constitution and the way that the established states had set up their, governments, local governments, and had to fall in line with that in order to become a state. But when they were still in this idyllic, newlywed phase, the honeymoon phase, Parley P. Pratt wrote to his brother Orson, who was on a mission in England, and I just love this, because it's like Shangri-La. I have resided almost a year in this lone retreat where civilized man has not made his home for the last 1,000 years, and where the ripening harvest has not been enjoyed for ages until the present age. All is quiet. No elections, no police reports, no murders, no wars in our little world. How quiet, how still, how peaceful, how happy, how lonesome, how free from excitement we live. The legislation of our High Council, the decision of some judges or court of the church, a meeting, a dance, a visit, an exploring route, an arrival of a party of trappers and traders, a Mexican caravan, a party from the States, from Fort Hall or Fort Bridger, visit of an Indian, or perhaps mail from the distant world once or twice a year is all that breaks the monotony of our busy and peaceful life. Our old firelocks have not been rubbed up and our swords unsheathed because of any alarm. No policeman or watchman of any kind have been on duty to guard us from external or internal dangers. Oh, what a life we live. It is the dream of the poets actually fulfilled.
Wow.
Wow.
So they didn't even they weren't getting like attacked by the Indians or anything at this time?
Well, the church always tried to maintain
Relations with them.
Yes, if they need something, let them have it. Try to always be fair with them and honest and treat them with respect.
There is
There
a little bit
was
where
a
there's
war, but
was
in
it?
later years.
Yeah,
Oh,
later.
okay.
And
That was
especially
later.
Stampede
settlements.
camps.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get it
Yeah.
chronologically. It's like, when did that, because
When did that start?
they did have that,
Hawk Indian Wars?
Right,
Or
that one.
Yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure where that was.
It's near Manti.
And, as more people were sent out to settle Idaho and
Oh, okay.
southern Utah.
So it was
Yes.
later on though.
And you'll
Yeah,
hear
I
stories
think
of
so.
people
And they had
as they were
both reasons.
traveling,
Well,
a
didn't they
lost
have
child who was taken, with the Indians, or a horse or a cow, minor things, but they always tried to just keep the spirit of the Lord with them and have it carry them through.
Yeah.
So then the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the Mexican-American conflict was settled.
Love it. Wow.
And on page, if you have your books, it's on page 93.
Mm-hmm.
So over on the left-hand side, the Mexican cessation included Utah, Nevada, Arizona, I believe New Mexico, and California there. It says the Mexican cessation. So the Saints had been right. They were going to, be part of the United States. Now, Brigham Young had some grandiose plans for, you have your books on the next page. The dark line here is where he came up for the territory of Deseret, taking the Deseret from the scriptures.
Yeah.
Yeah, down here. And then the dotted line is what the government's idea was. So there's quite a bit of difference in what Brigham Young thought he was going to get.
Well, the dark line is actually very accurate with the pioneer line. Very close. I mean, it's a little more in the up from the south side.
It's got all of Nevada, all of Utah, Arizona, but the actual territory of Utah, 1850, is that dotted line,
Yeah.
which leaves out California. There was a problem having California. There was
Okay.
that Utah being one geographically separated from California. The only way out was over the Sierra Nevadas.
Right.
And I'm not sure that the train tracks had not gone through that far yet. And it was a hard travel, so it would be hard to
Manage all of that land, all
and
that
then
area.
the culture in California did not measure up to church standards.
Right.
The ruffians, the gold miners, the fortune seekers,
Okay.
you know.
I don't wanna mess with
But
them.
what I'm saying is that to be a daughter,
Stake the wrong
that-
ways.
that line is very close to what your pioneers traveling in that
Yes.
area is.
Yeah.
I don't think it includes so much of Arizona, does it? The pioneer, you know, to be a daughter of the Utah pioneers.
Oh,
Did it include that part? Does it include that part? Because I didn't think it did.
I don't believe.
It's pretty close,
Yeah.
but I don't think it's. I think they shrunk it
I think
some.
that's worth looking into.
I think they shrunk it some.
The only reason they shrunk some of this on the border of New Mexico and kept it in is, I bet you already said this, but it's because of Texas. It
Yeah.
was already its own.
Yeah, it's its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could see that would be.
Culturally, they really, the church didn't know if they could control, I don't use the word control, influenced the culture that was in California, this rougher, tougher kind of people that would not be.
Well, Brigham Young wasn't a fan of the people who left to go to California and didn't come back.
Yes.
That's true. Yeah, story.
That's
But they
true.
said, I like California. It's a good place here. Well, I want you back.
Yeah.
No, we're here. It's hard to come back. Let's just stay.
Right. I can. Yeah.
So in 1851, this little pink map shows it's a little bit of Colorado, the corner of Wyoming.
Okay.
Takes off a little bit of the bottom of Nevada that went with Arizona.
Oh, okay.
So it changed here and there a little bit over the years, little pieces. So now that they were in official territory, Brigham Young shows the geographical center of Utah, Fillmore, Utah, right here. There's a picture in our scrapbook of me on those steps, me and my mama.
Oh.
My aunt and uncle owned a bed and breakfast in Fillmore. But it was only territorial state house for 3 years. It was originally supposed to be a big multi-wing building, you know, the state capitol.
Yeah.
And they named it after President Millard Fillmore to flatter him, to get on his good side, so they, you know, named it after him. But everything was going on in Salt Lake City. The location did not work. There was not a big enough town. There were not enough hotels, restaurants, whatever, to handle the influx of people that would be coming there for state business, for government business. Everything was happening up in Salt Lake, so finally after 3 years they said, okay, we're moving it up to Salt Lake City. And it's been there ever since.
Wow.
It's kind of like Sacramento and
Yes.
San Francisco.
Yes. They're also, well, when we get to statehood, I'll talk about that, about the slave issue, about,
So now it's a state park, is it not?
yes, it is.
So you can go there
And the entire bottom floor
and
is the DUP museum. It
Oh.
is massive.
Oh, nice.
Oh,
It
wow.
is just, it's been it's been a while since I was there.
I knew they worked to.
But it was
Save
just
it.
literally jammed. I mean, every inch. It's one of those shotgun buildings, you know, you can see through to the back hallway.
Oh.
And every inch of that hallway had a picture, a plaque, something hanging
Wow.
on it. And all side rooms had all been set up to show a home life, the government life, and all the artifacts. It's just almost too much to take in. You know, you just look at it and go, wow, where do they get all this stuff? And the daughters maintain those museums. You know that all these museums that are all over Utah and St. George and all these different places are maintained by their local DUP groups.
Yeah.
They man them, they do the artifacts and so on and so forth. And
Just a side note, our parade float went through the Hesperia Days parade, and there's a little blurb that was read by the MC, and he said, "This is sponsored by the Daughters of the Utah Pioneers, who made their way west from Utah," and of course they're all thinking, Utah, you know, because all these Californians are in the parade, until they realized, and they still work on keeping the restoration of the monuments that we have today. And people started cheering. And it was really neat.
That's
And it
neat.
doesn't end there. We won
Yeah.
second place. The
Wow.
float won second
We
place.
won
Wow.
second
Right.
place.
You know, we actually have enough history of our high high desert area
That's true.
to have a small museum somewhere, like the one, the one on Main Street,
The
you know,
Route 66.
by
Yeah,
you know, a nice little
the
museum.
history
We
of-
actually have enough history in our area. We just don't have enough active daughters to. Think if we had shifts where we had to sign up for shifts to go and man the museum, whatever days it was open, and gather the artifacts and label them, catalog them, care for them.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work, and I'm thankful to all those dear
Yeah.
ladies. I want to say old ladies because you know most of these ladies that are doing that are
Yeah,
my
they're
generation and up.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely.
and they're
Well, it's a lot to live up to too.
You know, they're
When you
so-
started saying
their
that, I thought, oh,
devotion
boy.
to it is really
Their
means a lot to
responsibility,
me.
yeah.
A lot to me.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
You know, I remember one of the first topics when I first joined DUP here, and it was about making sure we're keeping up. I think there was something going on, like people were taking the copper plaques off, and so that's something
Yes.
always to be concerned about.
right, yeah.
Yes, and if you, when you
So-
read your legacy
They-
that comes in the
yeah.
mail, I still get the hard copy. I guess we all do.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I prefer to.
There occasionally, from time to time, will be an article about that, having to go in and refurbish a monument because people have knocked the stones down, or they've taken the precious metals, or the bronze statues, or whatever there might be. But they have to raise the money. You know, they come up with the funds, have some kind of fundraising to pay for it, to refurbish these things.
So
So yeah.
our work isn't always over.
So this little map here just shows you, it went from this to this to this to this.
Okay.
So that ended up being the final one, and here is the list of the territorial governors.
So these governors were bishops? Any of
No,
them?
this is after.
After, okay.
This is when they decided, when they became, after the Treaty of the Guadalupe Hidalgo, they
Okay.
had to go into a more traditional form of government.
Okay.
Because you can see who they were appointed, which president appointed which governor here.
So, and this is still territory until the
Still
1900s,
territory,
right? Okay.
yes.
Well, now question. Did they say why they kept seceding so much land?
Yeah, it
Oh,
says
wait.
it right here.
Oh, it says it
What
right
page?
there.
98?
Well, yeah, 98, silver deposits were discovered
Oh.
in Utah
That's why
territory.
we lost Nevada.
And so they kept finding more silver.
Yes.
They took part of Utah and gave it to
That's
Nevada because they didn't want it going to the
They
church.
went,
Oh.
there's a good deal of
To the
it. They already
Utah
got
territory.
California, right?
They
Right.
wanted to keep it. Yeah,
Yeah.
but at this time it was silver.
What is,
This was in 1861.
what is unique about California?
Gold.
Well, because of the gold.
Oh,
The gold
um,
rush?
Our state
Agriculture.
seal,
There.
Well, it's the Golden State.
okay, I've got a senior moment. You're not supposed to call on that.
yeah, no problem.
The goddess is on the state seal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was born into her goddesshood as an adult. She was never a child. I can't come up with the name, and I've
Athena?
known it. I've been teaching it for years.
Athena? Athena came out of the head of Zeus.
So she never had a childhood. California was never a territory. It went
Oh,
straight
to
from
statehood.
Mexican to statehood.
Statehood.
That sounds like
Because of the gold.
Okay.
Happened in a month.
Oh,
Okay.
That's the gold.
So they never had a childhood as a territorial,
Right.
and because the government wanted control of the gold.
Right.
That's what happened in Nevada with the silver mines. We do not want the church to have control of all this wealth and all this silver, so we're going to cut that off and make them a state.
And they still have lots of ore in Utah.
Oh yes,
This
yeah.
little-
Then a silver reef.
But they were worried because so many people had then come to Utah and they were satelliting, they were going out and they're thinking, we've got to keep these Mormons under control. We gotta
Okay.
make sure that they don't get too much political or monetary control. So if you want to go through the list there, maybe you have an ancestor with one of those names. They were all appointed by United States presidents. And there's a few little biographical sketches, which I'm going to skip over on some of them, and maybe a little story about a couple of them, not all of them.
Look at that. I just love this list, though. It's like, oh, there's Abraham Lincoln. There's this
I did read through the stories. And they were, all this time, of course, their point was to achieve statehood. And what was the thing that stood in
the way.
the way was polygamy.
Polygamy.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the manifesto comes in.
Yes, in
Okay.
1885, President Grover Cleveland, his annual State of the Union address, the strength and perpetuity and the destiny of the nation rests upon our homes, established by the law of God, guarded by parental care, regulated by parental authority, and sanctified by parental love. These are not the homes of polygamy. There is no feature of this practice or the system which sanctions it, which is not opposed to all that is of value in our institutions. There should be no relaxation in the firm but just execution of the law now in operation, and I should be glad to approve such further discreet legislation as it will rid the country of this blot upon its fair fame. Since the people holding up polygamy in our territory are reinforced by immigration from other lands, I recommend that a law be passed to prevent the importation of Mormons into the country.
Wow.
So he was saying, don't even let them come in.
So that was the first immigration ban.
Yeah. So 2 years later,
What
yes,
will our husband
the
say
border
now?
wall, put the border walls up, send the ships back.
Well,
1887, there was an act that disincorporated the church.
we wouldn't have known Cindy.
And dissolved the perpetual immigration fund, which was bringing these people from the other countries
How
in.
can they do that when it's a private?
Well,
Because they had so much influence. Now this place isn't just a religion, they have a
The
state.
Congress
They
voted
made
on
it a
it.
law that you could practice it.
The
so
government-
those that had to practice now had to leave the country.
Well, it was already a law
Right.
in the United States, and that was an issue. That was an issue all the way from Nauvoo. I
Yeah.
mean, it's
But
been
we
an issue
weren't-
for the
yeah,
church. They weren't.
states.
You're not complying to
We
the
were
laws of the
territory.
country.
When they disincorporated the church, the federal government was directed to confiscate all church properties that were valued more than $50,000. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, what would the church have had that would be worth that much money?
Land.
Land.
Temples.
They had.
Certainly not meeting houses, ward houses.
No, but the land and the
The tabernacle.
Yeah.
Factories, businesses.
And
I mean, he was
Distilleries.
doing the brewery
Yeah.
stuff, right? So he had a lot thriving businesses, and
anyone caught practicing polygamy would be fined $500 to $800, $500 to $800, and 5 years in prison. Citizens wishing to vote, serve on jury duties, or hold public office were required to take an anti-polygamy oath. Women who lost the right to vote, which they had previously had, one of the first in the nation, they lost the right to vote, and women were required then to testify against their polygamous husbands. What is that now where I don't know
You
if there's a
can't-
name for it,
it
you
is.
cannot be forced to.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
To testify against
Your spouse.
But then they were required to.
so was it Woodrow Woodruff?
Yeah.
Woodruff. Say
I
that
didn't know that.
right.
Didn't say that fast.
Woodfull Woodruff in 1890 said the Supreme Court, of course the church challenged it, took it to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court upheld the act in 1890, and soon after, President Wilford Woodruff released the statement known today as the 1890 Manifesto. Listen to the wording, which officially advised against future plural marriages. Now the
And that would have
government
been
was,
the sensible thing to do instead of breaking up families
yes, and the
well, a lot of them
government
moved to
says-
Mexico.
the
That's what he
government
said.
was
You're out of
trying
this. Move out of the country.
in hiding.
wiping them out
Yeah.
completely,
Yeah.
and he worded it in a way so that we won't do it in the future.
Right.
We will
Yes.
assess to what you want.
Wasn't
But I know
that-
a lot of us in our family histories, Grandpa so-and-so went to jail, and Uncle so-and-so had this many wives and went to jail and served his time. My stepmother's mom, she was the original Grammy, you know, her dad was in prison as a polygamist. And, you know, stories that he was, you know, left a family, and the women, they're mostly women, and in their family they have a history of more daughters than sons, so the women had to take up the load because Grampy,
And then they couldn't even vote.
yeah, in
Took
prison.
away their right to vote.
Yeah.
So finally the Utah Territory was granted statehood January 4th, 1896, so it had been 49 years. The first governor was a church member, but they didn't let him stay in very long. The government assigned somebody from outside of Utah to come in because they were afraid having a church leader. His name was Daniel Wells, was a prominent citizen and church leader. 36-year-old banker at the time of his election. And he
served 2 terms, they say.
defeated his former employer in the election. Now, then they get into the political parties, and I'm going to skip this part. It only took 6 years before the first anti-Mormon political party was formed in Utah. It didn't take long.
I thought it was interesting, they mentioned the railroad kind of being the cause of that. The railroad made it easier for non-members to come into the valley.
1869, people started bringing the railroad in. May 10th, 1869, yeah. This guy, William Godbey, was the leader. His followers were called Godbeyites. And he was a merchant, and he had a pretty strong anti-church. He was an anti-moneymaker church, merchant way of thinking. And his followers eventually joined in with one of the other anti-polygamous parties, and they kind of melded together. But there were the pro-merchant parties and the anti-merchant parties, which would have been the farmers, the ranchers. The pro-merchant ones were both church members and non-church members, but a lot of the people that came in to make money, set up the stores, set up the banks, the stores, whatever they could make money off of, and they had their own political parties, and they could pass laws favorable to themselves. And it took a while before they settled into the two-party system that we're familiar with now. You know, parties have come and go, and some have joined together, and so it just, there's a lot of that in the next 3 pages of just going back and forth. But with all these different political parties that were so different from each other, there's an interesting way that they celebrated once the election was over. Election years provided a great number of social events and excitement. Rallies were followed, guest speakers, political musical numbers, local talent. They wrote election songs and did not hesitate to use their opponent's name. And then there's some rhymes in here that are putting down their fellow candidates. We don't want you, AG, to pay out the people's cash. We would rather have JC. He'll do nothing that is rash. And there's one called Marching Through Zion, it's kind of long. That was the song of the liberals, and talking about how great their party is. It says these songs were sung with great enthusiasm as the elections drew close. Now, we've just been through an election, and we know the name calling. We know the then you're going after somebody's character and what it should be about policies and not personal, but it's the way politics is.
You know what, I like that phrase. It says, so the royal family said, whatever, but that was their mistake. We'll show them at the ballot boxes who will take the cake.
All done in good
It's really
nature.
down to it. That's what
Sung with
matters.
great enthusiasm, and as the election date grew closer, the audiences became more sizable and more vocal. Cheering and laughter were the responses to guest speakers who told stories and jokes at the expense of the opposing party. Children aligned with the political parties of their parents. Well, that's not true nowadays necessarily, because all three of my children and I are miles apart. Children would wear badges supporting their parents' affiliation. Scuffles often took place among children whose parents were of different parties. In our family, we just don't talk politics at family situations.
That's a lot of families.
We don't.
Yeah.
We agree to disagree. We all love each other. Family's more important.
That is good.
You vote your conscience. You vote your conscience. Oh my conscience. Says bands in the parade were often continued well after dark. The tallest men would carry torches to light the way through town. Clowns dressed to impersonate a political opponent made comical gestures, which typically ended in a barbecue at the city park. The celebrations continued after the election was over. So Florence Ellison wrote, "One of the strangest things of the whole affair was the wholesomeness which these campaigns were dispatched. After the election, a big victory dance and supper was given, and members of both parties danced and ate together, as though there had never been a conflicting idea. Our fathers of both parties were friends with a difference of opinion. That was taken care of by the major vote." Okay, we had our election. You win. Congratulations.
Shake hands.
Let's party. Let's eat.
Yeah.
Let's dance. You know, we're
We're civilized.
Well, it's like it used to be of parties just having the same goal, different ways to get about getting there. Now it's not the case. It's become way more personal and
Yes.
divisive.
So Frank and I try to watch a news neutral station and
Good luck.
yeah.
True.
And one of the guys said, okay, so it wasn't. Be a decent citizen, wait and see how it turns out. You know, we're working our way through this. We're all in this together. We're all working our way through it. Just because you didn't win, you don't be a spoil sport. You support what is to be, and if you don't agree with it, then you continue striving for your ideals in the proper channels of the government.
Yes.
You know, by passing legislation and so on and so forth, the correct way. You don't go out and riot, and you don't
Like in
not
2017.
destroying.
You have a
When I was in
water
San
donating
Francisco,
contest.
that was the scare. It was fine in Hawaii. In Hawaii, it was totally fine. It was something else to see when I go to San Francisco. Unfortunately, I had come down south to spend time with the family, but I was glad I left for that time. But I came back to see that there was so much riots, so many destruction, and it was that way for the 4 years. It was horrible. I was just like, wow, this is
Do it through the
this
proper
is not
channels
healthy.
of government.
This is not healthy. This is bad. This is
We have
poor
our
behavior.
voice, we have our political parties,
Am
we
I
can
in the
work
United
with
States?
know.
Are we supposed to have differences of opinion?
Yeah, my daughter's daughter, my granddaughter was going up to San Francisco for her birthday, and I said, well, San Francisco's near and dear to my heart because I was born in Oakland, and my relatives were in Oakland and Berkeley, both sides of my mother's family and my father's family. So we spent a lot of time in San Francisco, and that was our favorite place when my children were little. But I said, why would you want to go there now? Because I know that it's not this beautiful, cultural, rich city that has always been there with this, Golden Gate Park and the fabulous art and the cultures. It's just amazing.
It is.
It's not now.
It's not the same. It's like when I moved from Hawaii there.
Yeah, and she
Every
said,
patient told
she
me.
said it's because he has a good friend there. It was part of their wedding, and her best friend, who was her maid of honor, both live in San Francisco. I mean, they don't know each other, but they're both in the area, so that's why they went up there.
That's fair.
But
it's such a strange place. That's what every patient would tell me. They said, you would have loved it 30 years ago.
Just from the architecture to Chinatown to the fishing culture, and Golden Gate Park was one of the most amazing places. Just until my kids got to be
I've been there.
got to be the age of, I think the last time before my aunt had her stroke, we had to explain, okay, we're going to Golden Park and you may see. So,
Well, I never saw anything when I drive through or fly in, but
well, it
but it
was
depends too. I mean, there is
Well,
some rich.
I just shared some
It'd be
stories
Western
yesterday that I don't
history.
want to repeat.
for the game
Western-
culture.
the
We
Western-
had to.
Okay, right.
Oh. Oh.
All that aside, the Western frontier. You know, you travel to San Francisco for opportunities.
Yes.
You know, the history's still there, and that's what California is to many of us. It's the history. It's not the gold rush. It's where we were born. It might have been the first ward we were in.
Mhm.
When I was reading about this, how it was 49 years after Brigham Young
Yes.
said this is the place. Okay, and then it becomes a state. I think to myself, how does that connect to my father, or since my grandparents came from the area? 1949, he's graduating high school. 100 years later, how are we? How were we? And I think there's connections there that make what we see in California, and it is still a very beautiful place to live.
Oh yeah.
The hills, yeah, a lot of great people that are holding on, and
And it says here,
it's really cool.
something I forgot to mention. The government did not like the word beehive because it was too connected to the church. We know beehive means the beehive, the bees are industrial, our saints are industrial, blah, blah, blah. That's why they picked the name Utah, which is after the Ute Indians. So Brigham Young,
It would have been Beehive.
he said,
Deseret.
Or
okay,
Deseret.
what, if that's what it takes, okay, we'll go along with it. But he tried 3 times to change the name. I wrote down, where did I write the dates down? 3 times he actually went to Congress to get the name changed back to Beehive. He was just placating them in the beginning, and it never happened. But he tried. And it says the Beehive, Utah is still known as the Beehive State, with many businesses incorporating the word Beehive or Deseret into their names. They got a new flag in 2023, which doesn't look, have you seen side by side? It's not a whole lot different, but it still has the beehive on the new flag that came out last year. So Brigham Young kind of got his way in a little bit, but he legally tried 3 times to go through the government to get it changed. He never gave up on it.
I love that. I love its symbol.
So he died without ever having achieved that goal in his life.
Well, he made his state. That's
Not many
Yeah, it
people
became a
get that.
state at least.
Yeah, it's in the script somewhere it tells you the 3 dates, the 3 years that he tried. It's somewhere in the middle of the lesson.
I need to leave at 12 after the
Okay.
setup for dinner.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you so much for everything.
That was great.
That was
You did a
great.
great job.
For any of you who want to stay, there is some chicken.